The line stretched for 3 blocks outside the Seoul Processing Center. Thousands of people waited under the hot summer sun, each one representing the peak of human physical achievement. Ji-hoon Park stood among them, clutching a plastic bag with his cousin's lunch inside, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. He was supposed to deliver the food and leave. That was it. His cousin Minho had talked for months about joining the Galactic Coalition Military Academy. The aliens had opened their prestigious training program to humans for the first time in history, and Minho had prepared for years. Enhanced muscles, bone grafts, neural implants. He had spent every credit his family could borrow to become the perfect candidate. Then this morning, Minho had called Ji-hoon in a panic. He couldn't do it. The fear was too much. Could Ji-hoon bring him something to eat while he gathered his courage? Ji-hoon had taken the subway from his apartment in Busan, ridden for 2 hours, and arrived at the processing center. He had called Minho 15 times. No answer. He had checked the registration area, asked security guards, even described his cousin to other candidates. Nobody had seen him. Now, Ji-hoon stood in line because he didn't know what else to do. The registration officials kept directing him forward. They scanned his ID card, assumed he was there to register, and sent him to the next checkpoint. Each time Ji-hoon tried to explain the mistake, they waved him along impatiently. Too many candidates, not enough time. Around him, the real recruits looked like heroes from movies. The man in front of Ji-hoon had arms thick as tree trunks and stood over 2 meters tall. The woman behind him had cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly blue. Enhanced soldiers in military uniforms compared their modification specs. Athletes with impossible physiques stretched and flexed. Ji-hoon looked down at himself. Average height. Average build. He worked at a convenience store, stocking shelves and operating the register. His most intense physical activity was carrying boxes of ramen from the storage room. He had taken taekwondo classes as a child, but that was 15 years ago. The line moved into the building. It was massive, clearly alien construction with smooth walls that seemed to glow from within. The ceiling stretched impossibly high. Strange symbols flickered across translucent displays. The aliens themselves stood at testing stations throughout the hall. Ji-hoon had seen them on news broadcasts, but seeing them in person was different. The Vex were tall and thin, their bodies made of what looked like living crystal. Light refracted through them in rainbow patterns. They moved with precise, measured grace. Next candidate, a translated voice called out. The words came from a small device that floated near each Vex's head. Ji-hoon stepped forward. He opened his mouth to explain the mistake, to tell them he was just looking for his cousin. But a Vex gestured for him to stand on a circular platform, and somehow Ji-hoon found himself obeying. Lights swept over him from every direction. Displays around the platform filled with numbers and graphs. The Vex examining him tilted its head, the gesture somehow conveying confusion despite its alien features. Physical strength, 47. The translator announced. Speed index, 51. Enhancement level, 0. Combat training, 2. Other Vex turned to look. Candidates nearby stopped their own tests to stare. The numbers were pathetically low. Most candidates scored above 80 in at least one category. Enhanced soldiers regularly hit 95 or higher. Are you certain you wish to apply? The Vex asked. Its tone, even through translation, suggested this was a polite way of telling Ji-hoon to leave. Actually, I'm looking for my cousin, Ji-hoon began. He was supposed to register, but I think he changed his mind, and I just came to bring him lunch, and there's been a mistake. The Vex held up one crystalline hand. It consulted with another Vex. Their conversation a series of chiming sounds that the translators didn't process. Then it did something with the controls. The scanning platform lit up again, brighter this time. The displays flickered. Numbers appeared and disappeared. Error messages scrolled across screens. The Vex made a sound like breaking glass alarm. Maybe. Or confusion. Scanner malfunction, it announced. Results inconsistent. Running secondary analysis. Too live. More lights. More scanning. The readings stabilized eventually, showing the same low scores as before. But Ji-hoon noticed the Vex's posture had changed. It kept looking between him and the displays with what might have been suspicion. A larger Vex approached, its crystalline body darker and more complex than the others. Decorative patterns along its arms suggested rank or status. "I am Commander Thalen," the translator said. "These readings are unusual. The sensors cannot establish baseline parameters for your biology." "Ask, I can just go," Ji-hoon offered. "This was all a mistake anyway. I'm not supposed to be here." Thalen studied him for a long moment. Then it turned to confer with the other Vex. Their chiming conversation went on for several minutes. Other candidates in line began complaining about the delay. Finally, Thalen turned back to Ji-hoon. "What is your name?" "Yi-hoon Park." "Ji-hoon Park, I am accepting your application to the Galactic Coalition Military Academy." The words took several seconds to process. Ji-hoon blinked. "What? No. I didn't apply. I told you. I'm just looking for my cousin. Your biometrics present an anomaly our sensors cannot properly analyze," Thalen explained. "If our advanced scanning technology cannot read you accurately, perhaps enemy sensors will experience similar difficulties. You may prove useful as a stealth asset, but I'm not a soldier. I work at a convenience store. Many successful soldiers came from civilian backgrounds. The academy exists to provide training," Thalen gestured, and a datapad floated over to Ji-hoon. "Your acceptance is official. Transportation to the Orbital Academy will depart in 3 days. All necessary information is on this device." Ji-hoon stared at the datapad. This was insane. He should refuse. He should explain more clearly that this was all a terrible mistake. He should walk away right now. But Ji-hoon had a problem. He had always had this problem. Since childhood. He was terrible at saying no. When teachers asked for volunteers, his hand went up. When co-workers needed someone to cover their shifts, he agreed. When his family needed help with anything, he showed up. The word no just never seemed to come out of his mouth at the right time. "I really don't think," he started. "Your shuttle assignment is included in the documentation," Thalen interrupted. "Do you have questions about the academy requirements? What if I'm just not good enough? Those scores you saw, those are real. I'm not enhanced. I'm not special. I'm just average." Thalen's head tilted in that strange way again. "The academy will determine your capabilities. That is its purpose. Do you accept the assignment?" Ji-hoon looked around the hall. Enhanced soldiers everywhere. Cybernetic warriors. Genetic prodigies. People who had spent their entire lives preparing for this opportunity. And then there was him. Ji-hoon Park from Busan. 23 years old. No enhancements. No special training. No qualifications whatsoever. He should say no. Any sane person would say no. "Okay," Ji-hoon heard himself say. "I accept." 3 days later, Ji-hoon stood in the shuttle port with a small bag of belongings. He had quit his job at the convenience store. His manager had been understanding, if confused. His parents had been proud, though his mother cried. His friends thought he was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Ji-hoon suspected it was the second one. The other candidates boarding the shuttle were impressive specimens. Dae-ho Choi, a super soldier with titanium-laced bones, barely fit through the doorway. Mireille Kim's cybernetic enhancements glowed softly beneath her skin. Taejin Hwang looked like someone had sculpted the perfect human from marble. They all glanced at Ji-hoon as he found his seat. Some looked curious. Most looked dismissive. One enhanced soldier actually laughed. The shuttle lifted off, and Earth fell away below them. Ji-hoon watched his home planet shrink to a blue marble against the black of space. He had never been off-world before. He had never been in combat. He had never done anything particularly brave or impressive in his entire life. The orbital academy appeared ahead, a massive structure that glittered with alien technology. Ji-hoon's stomach churned with anxiety. What had he gotten himself into? The first day at the academy, Ji-hoon learned what real pain felt like. The training hall operated at 3 times Earth's normal gravity. The other recruits handled it with various degrees of difficulty, their enhanced bodies and cybernetic systems compensating for the increased weight. Ji-hoon took 3 steps into the room and collapsed to his knees. "On your feet, recruit," the instructor barked. It was a Krath, one of the reptilian warrior species that formed the backbone of coalition ground forces. It stood over 2 meters tall, with scales like polished bronze. Ji-hoon tried to stand. His legs shook with the effort. Each breath felt like someone was sitting on his chest. He made it halfway up, before falling again. The Krath instructor, whose name was Vrax, stared down at him with obvious disgust. "How did you pass the screening process?" "I don't know," Ji-hoon gasped. It was the truth. Around the room, other recruits completed their exercises. Dae-ho Choi performed one-armed push-ups, his enhanced muscles barely straining. Mireille Kim moved through a combat kata, her cybernetic reflexes making each motion impossibly smooth. Even the other baseline humans, the ones without extensive modifications, managed to function in the high gravity. Only Ji-hoon lay on the floor like a dying fish. "You have 10 seconds to stand," Vrax said, "or you will be removed from the program." Somehow, Ji-hoon got his feet under him. He stood, wobbling, his whole body screaming in protest. Sweat poured down his face. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Move to the training area," Vrax ordered. The training area was 20 meters away. It might as well have been 20 kilometers. Ji-hoon took 1 step, then another. Each footfall felt like he was lifting a building. Other recruits finished their exercises and left the hall, flowing around him like water around a stone. Some smirked. Others looked away, embarrassed for him. It took Ji-hoon 15 minutes to cross the room. When he finally reached the training area, the session had already ended. Vrax stood waiting, arms crossed. "You are dismissed," the instructor said. "Return tomorrow. Try not to die in the meantime." The second day was combat simulations. Recruits entered virtual reality pods that generated realistic battle scenarios. The goal was to survive as long as possible against simulated enemies. Ji-hoon lasted 43 seconds. The simulation generated 3 hostile targets, standard enemy soldiers from one of the coalition's rival factions. They moved with tactical precision, using cover and coordinating their fire. Ji-hoon's assigned weapon was a plasma rifle, standard coalition issue. He raised the weapon, aimed at the closest target, and pulled the trigger. The recoil threw him backward. He landed hard. The breath knocked from his lungs. By the time he recovered, all 3 enemy soldiers had eliminated him. The pod opened. Ji-hoon climbed out, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline. 43 seconds, a voice said. "That's actually impressive." Ji-hoon turned to find a young woman watching him. She wore the tactical officer candidate uniform, dark blue with silver insignia. Her name tag read, Hana Lee. "Impressive how?" Ji-hoon asked. "Everyone else lasted at least 5 minutes. Impressive that you even entered the pod." Hana smiled. "I've seen your scores. Most people with your stats would have washed out already. But you're still here. Reposited. Looksteaks, and one of the way. I don't think I'll be here much longer. Maybe." Hana pulled up a data pad and showed him something. "I've been reviewing your file. Did you know the sensors couldn't get consistent readings during your initial screening?" "Ah," Ji-hoon nodded. "Commander Thalen mentioned something about that. Don't you think that's strange? These sensors can analyze alien biology from 100 different species. But they glitch when they scan you? I just figured I broke them somehow." Hana laughed. "You can't break coalition sensors by standing near them. Something else is going on." She tapped the datapad thoughtfully. I'm going to figure out what. The third day was endurance testing. Recruits ran obstacle courses, climbed walls, and completed physical challenges designed to push them to their limits. Ji-hoon finished last in every single event. By the fourth day, he had become the Academy's unofficial mascot. Other recruits made jokes about him in the dining hall. Some took bets on how long he would last before quitting. The kindest ones simply ignored him. Only Hana still talked to him. She sat with him at meals, discussing theories about his sensor anomalies. She seemed genuinely interested in the mystery, treating it like a puzzle to solve rather than evidence of Ji-hoon's inadequacy. Maybe you have some kind of latent ability, she suggested over lunch. Something that hasn't activated yet. Ji-hoon picked at his food. Or maybe I'm just regular, and their sensors expected something more interesting. Regular doesn't break alien technology. The fifth day changed everything. The training session was spacewalk practice. Recruits suited up and exited through the Academy's airlocks, performing basic maneuvers in the vacuum around the station. Tethers kept them connected to the hull. Safety protocols monitored every movement. Ji-hoon actually felt better in zero gravity. His lack of physical strength mattered less when everything was weightless. He completed the basic exercises without embarrassing himself too badly. Then something hit the station. Alarms screamed across all frequencies. A micro-meteor shower, unexpected and fast, peppered the Academy's outer hull. Most of the fragments were tiny, deflected by shields, but one piece, bigger than the rest, struck near the training area. Vector, a Krath recruit, took the impact directly. It didn't penetrate his suit, but it severed his tether and sent him spinning away from the station, tumbling end over end into the void. For 3 seconds, everyone froze. Even the instructors, monitoring from inside, seemed paralyzed by shock. 3 seconds where Vector spun farther and farther away, his momentum carrying him into empty space. Ji-hoon didn't think. He just moved. His hands found the maneuvering controls on his suit. Small jets that allowed fine positioning during spacewalks. He oriented toward Vector and fired the jets at maximum thrust. The Academy had safety limits on the jets. Maximum speed, maximum distance from the hull. Ji-hoon's suit immediately started blaring warnings that he was exceeding protocols. He ignored them. Zero gravity was strange. No up or down, no weight, no reference points except the stars wheeling overhead and the station falling behind. Ji-hoon kept his eyes on Vector, making constant tiny adjustments to his trajectory. The jets on his suit weren't designed for pursuit, just for gentle positioning, but he fired them in rapid bursts, building speed. The suit's AI calculated intercept probability, 12%, and dropping. Ji-hoon adjusted his angle, fired the lateral jets, compensated for Vector's spin. The Krath was still tumbling, unconscious or disoriented, unable to help himself. Intercept probability, 18%. More adjustments. Ji-hoon's hands moved across the controls without hesitation, making calculations he didn't consciously understand. Fire this jet for 0.3 seconds. Adjust angle by 4 degrees. Compensate for drift. Intercept probability, 41%. The distance closed. Vector spun past, and Ji-hoon's hand shot out, fingers closing around the Krath's equipment harness. He had him. Now came the hard part. Getting back. The station was distant now, a bright shape against the stars. Ji-hoon's jets had maybe 30 seconds of fuel remaining. Not enough for a direct return, especially not carrying Vector's mass along with his own. He did more math in his head. Trajectory, momentum, fuel consumption. He fired the jets in a pattern, not heading directly for the station but aiming for a point where the station would be, accounting for orbital movement. The suit AI updated constantly. Return probability, 32%, 41%, 58%. Ji-hoon's fuel gauge dropped toward 0. He made the final calculation and fired the jets in one long burn. then let momentum carry them. Either the math was right, or they would drift past the station into empty space. They coasted through the void. Stars slid past. The station grew larger. A tether shot out from the station's hull, magnetic grapple locking onto Jihoon's suit. Recovery drones emerged from the airlocks, guiding both recruits back to safety. Inside the station, medical teams took Vector away. He was bruised and shaken but alive. Jihoon sat in the airlock, still in his suit, staring at his hands. They were steady, not even trembling. 17 minutes, someone said. Jihoon looked up. Commander Thalen stood there, its crystalline form refracting the airlock lights into rainbow patterns. You were in vacuum for 17 minutes, Thalen continued. Your heart rate never exceeded 95 beats per minute. Even when carrying Vector. Even when calculating return trajectory. The suit logs show complete calm. I just did what needed to be done, Jihoon said. Yes, Thalen said softly. You did. And that, recruit Jihoon Park, is very interesting indeed. Word of the rescue spread through the academy. Recruits who had mocked Jihoon now looked at him differently. Not with respect exactly, but with confusion. Like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Vector found Jihoon in the dining hall the next day. The Kroth stood over him, massive and intimidating. Then he placed one clawed hand on Jihoon's shoulder. You saved my life, Vector said in his rumbling voice. Jihoon didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. That night, lying in his bunk, he replayed the rescue in his mind. He had been terrified, obviously. Saving someone in open space should have been impossible for someone with his training level. But during those 17 minutes, he hadn't felt panic. Just focus. Maybe Hana was right. Maybe there was something different about him. Or maybe he had just gotten incredibly lucky. Either way, he was still here. Still the weakest recruit on paper. Still struggling with every training exercise. But at least now, some people thought he might be worth keeping around. Hana Lee had access to the Academy's research archives that most recruits never saw. As a tactical officer candidate with top marks in analysis and strategy, she had clearance to dig through classified xenobiology studies and historical combat data. She spent every free moment searching for answers about Jihoon's scanner anomalies. On the 7th day of training, she found something. Look at this, she said, cornering Jihoon after breakfast. She pulled up a document on her datapad, barely able to contain her excitement. It's a study from 20 years ago, before the Coalition even made contact with Earth. Jihoon looked at the dense text and complicated graphs. I don't understand what I'm looking at. This is a xenobiology analysis of persistence hunting. Most predator species in the galaxy use ambush tactics or short, explosive chases. They're fast and powerful, but only for brief periods. Hana scrolled through the document. But Earth had this unusual evolutionary path. Humans developed the ability to chase prey for hours, even days, until the animal literally collapsed from exhaustion. Okay, but what does that have to do with combat training? Everything, Hana said. The Coalition's tests measure explosive power, instant strength, and quick reflexes because that's how most species fight. But humans evolved differently. We're not the fastest or the strongest, but we can just keep going. She pulled up another file. This one marked with high security classifications. I found a study buried in the medical archives. They tested baseline humans against other species for psychological endurance. Jihoon, humans scored 340% higher than any other known species. Jihoon processed this slowly. So you're saying I'm not weak? I'm just built for different things? Exactly. The scanners couldn't read you properly because they were looking for the wrong markers. They measured power. And you have average power, but they never measured your ability to endure. Hana's eyes gleamed with discovery. Nobody's actually tested that in combat conditions. Not properly. This. Before Jihoon could respond, alarms echoed through the academy's corridors. All recruits received the same message simultaneously on their personal devices. Report to the main assembly hall, immediately. Commander Thalen stood at the center of the hall when the recruits gathered. The crystalline alien's form seemed to glow brighter than usual, suggesting agitation or excitement. An evaluation has been scheduled, Thalen announced. All recruits will participate in the gauntlet, effective immediately. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The gauntlet was legendary, a final test that wasn't supposed to happen until the end of training. It was designed to break even the strongest candidates. The gauntlet is a continuous combat simulation, Thalen explained. You will face constant enemy contact for 72 hours. No breaks. No rest periods. The simulation will continue until you are eliminated, or until the time expires. Daeho Choi raised his hand. What's the record for longest survival? 41 hours, Thalen said, set by a Krath warrior 3 years ago. Most recruits last between 24 and 36 hours before psychological collapse forces withdrawal. 72 hours. 3 full days and nights of continuous combat. No sleep. No recovery time. Just endless fighting, until the mind broke under the pressure. Jihoon felt his stomach drop. If he struggled with normal training exercises, how could he possibly survive this? The simulation pods were larger than the training versions, designed for extended occupation. Recruits entered in groups of 10, each person facing their own separate scenario, but monitored together. Medical teams stood ready to extract anyone who reached dangerous physical or psychological thresholds. Jihoon stepped into his pod. The door sealed with a hiss. Darkness surrounded him for a moment. Then the simulation activated. He stood in a ruined city. Buildings shattered by weapons fire. Smoke rising from countless fires. Enemy contacts appeared on his helmet display. Dozens of them. Approaching from multiple directions. The battle began. For the first 6 hours, Jihoon employed the only strategy he knew. Stay defensive, conserve energy, and try to survive. He found a building with good cover and limited entry points. He rationed his ammunition carefully. When enemies approached, he fired controlled bursts rather than spraying bullets wildly. He died 17 times in those first 6 hours. Each time, the simulation respawned him in a slightly different location, forcing him to adapt to new terrain and new threats. Outside the pods, in the monitoring station, instructors watched the recruits' progress. Enhanced soldiers racked up impressive elimination counts. Daeho Choi moved like a machine, his augmented strength allowing him to carry heavy weapons and shrug off injuries that would stop normal humans. Mireille Kim's cybernetic reflexes meant she never missed a shot. Jihoon had one of the lowest elimination counts in the entire group, but he was still active, still fighting. Hour 12 arrived. Some of the weaker recruits had already withdrawn. Overwhelmed by the constant stress, the enhanced soldiers were still performing brilliantly, using their superior capabilities to dominate the simulation. Hour 24. This was when the gauntlet's true nature revealed itself. Physical capability mattered, but the real challenge was psychological. Constant combat, no rest, no relief from the pressure. Even enhanced bodies needed sleep eventually. Daeho Choi was the first elite recruit to fall. His enhanced metabolism, which gave him incredible strength, burned through his energy reserves at an accelerated rate. By hour 26, he was running on empty. His movements became sluggish. His aim deteriorated. He made a tactical mistake, got surrounded, and was eliminated. He emerged from his pod enraged, screaming that the simulation was unfair, that it didn't account for proper supply logistics. Medical staff had to restrain him. Inside the pods, the remaining recruits fought on. Jihoon had developed a rhythm. Fight for 30 minutes, find secure cover, rest for 5 minutes. Not sleep, he couldn't sleep. But just sit, breathe. Let his muscles relax slightly, before the next wave came. His elimination count was still pathetically low, but he was still in the fight. Hour 36. Mireille Kim's cybernetic implants started overheating. The simulation's continuous operation pushed her systems beyond their designed limits. She suffered severe headaches, her vision blurring as her neural connections struggled to cope. She held out until hour 38 before medical teams forced her withdrawal. Her implants at risk of permanent damage. Hour 48. Half the recruits were gone now. The survivors were mostly enhanced soldiers and a few exceptional baseline humans with military backgrounds. And Ji-hoon, who looked exhausted but was somehow still functional. Tae-jin Hwang, the genetically perfect specimen, lasted until hour 52. His body could have continued. His muscles showed no significant fatigue, his reflexes remained sharp, but his mind broke. He had been engineered for peak performance. Optimized for excellence. 52 hours of imperfect combat, of constant mistakes and deaths and failures, shattered his psychological foundation. He requested extraction, mumbling incoherently about failure parameters and optimization errors. Hour 60. Only 3 recruits remained active. Vektar, the Krath, whose warrior culture prided itself on endurance. Hana Lee, running on stimulants and sheer tactical genius, using her mind to compensate for her body's limitations. And Ji-hoon, the monitoring station had gone quiet. Instructors watched in disbelief as the weakest recruit on paper continued to function. His vital signs showed extreme fatigue. Obviously, his stress hormones should have been through the ceiling. But his heart rate remained steady. His movements, while slow, stayed purposeful. "How is he still going?" one instructor asked. Commander Thalen studied the displays. "Look at his approach. He is not trying to win. He is simply trying to survive each moment. No grand strategy. No attempt at glory. Just persistence." Hour 72. The official end time for the gauntlet. Vektar collapsed at hour 71, his warrior's pride finally broken by exhaustion. He had pushed himself beyond any reasonable limit, determined to prove Krath's superiority. But even he had limits. Hana made it to hour 73. The stimulants that kept her going finally wore off all at once, and her body simply shut down. Medical teams extracted her immediately, her vitals dangerously low. Ji-hoon kept fighting. Hour 74. The simulation administrators didn't know what to do. The test was supposed to end at 72 hours. Ji-hoon had technically passed, but he showed no signs of requesting extraction. Hour 75. Thalen made a call to the simulation control room. "What is his status?" "ITB. Vital signs stable. Exhausted, obviously, but not in medical danger. He seems to be continuing. Does he know the test is over?" "We've sent notification." He acknowledged it, but he hasn't stopped. Thalen watched the monitors. In the simulation, Ji-hoon sat against a wall, eating a ration bar from his virtual supplies. He looked tired. His movements were slow, but his eyes were alert, scanning for threats. Hour 76. Thalen finally ordered the simulation terminated. Ji-hoon's pod opened. He sat there for a moment, blinking in the sudden light of the monitoring station. Then he climbed out slowly, every movement careful and measured. "The test is complete," Thalen said. "You may rest now." Ji-hoon nodded. "Did I pass?" The question was so earnest, so genuinely uncertain, that several instructors laughed. Not mockingly, but with something like amazement. "Yes, Recruit Park," Thalen said. "You passed. Good." Ji-hoon started walking toward the exit. "I'm going to sleep now." He made it 5 steps before his legs gave out. Medical teams caught him before he hit the floor. They carried him to the infirmary, where he slept for 16 hours straight. When he finally woke, Hana sat beside his bed. She looked almost as exhausted as he felt. "You beat the record," she said. 76 hours. They're calling it impossible. It didn't feel impossible, Jihoon said. It just felt long. That's because you're built for long. Hana showed him her datapad. I was right. The Coalition has been measuring humans all wrong. They looked for enhanced warriors and missed what makes baseline humans special. Jihoon sat up slowly. His whole body ached. What happens now? Now, a new voice said. We find out what you are truly capable of. Commander Thalen entered the infirmary. The alien moved to stand beside Jihoon's bed. I am assigning you to a special operations unit, Thalen said. A test program for new human combat doctrine. Interested? Jihoon thought about it. Thought about everything that had happened since that confused day in Seoul, when he had accidentally joined the military. He was still the weakest recruit on paper, still struggled with basic training, but he had lasted 76 hours in the gauntlet. Maybe that meant something after all. Yes, Jihoon said. The medical examination took 6 hours. Dr. Sujin Yoon, the Coalition's leading human xenobiologist, personally supervised every test. She had flown in from the research station specifically to study Jihoon after his performance in the gauntlet. Jihoon sat on an examination table while scanners swept over him for what felt like the 100th time. Dr. Yoon watched the displays with intense focus, occasionally making notes on her datapad. Fascinating, she muttered. Absolutely fascinating. Is something wrong with me? Jihoon asked. Wrong. No. Different? Very much yes, Doctor. Yoon pulled up a holographic display showing Jihoon's muscle structure. Look at this. Your muscle fiber composition is heavily skewed towards slow-twitch fibers, about 70%, compared to the human average of 50-50 split between slow and fast twitch. Jihoon stared at the display. I don't know what that means. Slow-twitch fibers are for endurance. They don't generate explosive power, but they can work for extended periods without fatiguing. Fast-twitch fibers are the opposite, powerful but quick to exhaust. She zoomed in on different muscle groups. Your body is literally built for long-term activity, rather than short bursts of strength. She pulled up more displays. Brain scans, hormone levels, nerve response patterns. Your stress response system is equally unusual. When most people face danger, their bodies flood with adrenaline and cortisol. Fight or flight response. It's immediate and powerful, but also exhausting. Dr. Yoon highlighted specific readings. Your body does something different. Your stress hormones increase, but much more gradually, and your brain has developed enhanced regulatory systems that dampen panic responses. So I don't panic as much? You still experience fear and stress. But your body treats extreme situations as manageable rather than catastrophic. You don't spike into panic mode. You settle into a sustainable state of heightened alertness. Dr. Yoon smiled. During the gauntlet, your body essentially said, "This is fine. We can do this all day instead of emergency. Shutdown imminent." Jihoon thought about the rescue in space, about the endless hours in the simulation. She was right. He had been afraid, but never panicked. Just focused. Is this normal for humans? He asked. For baseline humans? It's within normal range, but at the extreme end of the distribution. You're not superhuman. You're just very, very human. In specific ways. Dr. Yoon compiled her findings into a report and presented it to Commander Thalen and the Academy leadership that evening. Jihoon sat in the conference room, feeling deeply uncomfortable as they discussed him like he was a laboratory specimen. The Coalition has been recruiting humans incorrectly, Doctor. Yoon stated bluntly. We looked for enhanced warriors, people modified to compete with other species in traditional combat metrics. But we missed what makes baseline humans unique. She displayed historical data on the main screen. Humans evolved on a planet with unusual pressures. Persistence hunting. Long-distance migration. The ability to continue functioning under extended duress. No other species in the coalition developed quite the same way. One of the Krath instructors spoke up. But humans are physically weaker than most warrior species, slower than predator species, less armored than— Yes, Dr. Yoon interrupted. In short-term metrics, humans are unremarkable. But in extended operations, baseline humans outperform almost everyone. They just keep going. They adapt psychologically to sustained stress in ways that enhanced soldiers and other species simply cannot. She pulled up comparative data from the gauntlet. Enhanced human soldiers have better initial performance, but they crash harder. Their modifications consume more energy, generate more waste heat, and create psychological expectations of superior performance. When they start failing, they fail catastrophically. The graph showed it clearly. Enhanced soldiers shot up fast and burned out quickly. Baseline humans like Ji-hoon started lower, but maintained steady performance far longer. Recruit Park represents an extreme example of baseline human characteristics, Dr. Yoon concluded. But he's not unique. There are millions of humans with similar profiles. The coalition has been ignoring them in favor of enhanced candidates. Commander Thalen was quiet for a long moment. Then it spoke. Your recommendation? Develop a new combat doctrine specifically for baseline human endurance. Stop trying to make humans compete in alien combat styles. Let them fight the way their evolution designed them to fight. That night, Thalen approached Ji-hoon in the common area. The alien's crystalline form reflected the soft lighting in prismatic patterns. I have a proposal, Thalen said. We are forming a special operations unit, a test program for baseline human combat tactics. You would be the first member. Ji-hoon looked up from the meal he was eating. Why me? Because you have demonstrated the core capability we wish to study. Also, I believe you do not fully understand your own potential. That makes you ideal for learning alongside us. What would this unit do? That is what we will discover together. Conventional tactics modified for human endurance. Long-term operations that would break standard forces. Missions that require persistence rather than immediate victory. Thalen paused. It will be difficult. Possibly more difficult than standard training. Ji-hoon almost laughed. Everything had been difficult since he arrived at the academy. What was a little more difficulty? Who else would be in this unit? He asked. I have identified several candidates. Hana Lee. Obviously. Her tactical expertise, combined with her performance in the gauntlet, makes her ideal. Vectar has requested assignment. He feels he owes you a debt and wishes to fight alongside you. Vectar wants to join a human unit? He was quite insistent. Thalen's tone suggested amusement. We also have Suman Baek, a baseline human pilot with an endurance profile similar to yours, and Kyung-nam, a communications specialist. All baseline or minimally enhanced. Over the next week, the team assembled. Ji-hoon met them in a private training facility, separate from the main academy. Sumin Baek was a quiet woman in her late 20s who had flown transport ships before joining the military. She had the same unassuming presence as Ji-hoon. Someone you wouldn't look at twice in a crowd. Kyung-nam was younger, barely 20, with enhanced hearing from minor cybernetic modifications but otherwise baseline physiology. He seemed nervous, but determined. Vectar towered over all of them, the massive Krath warrior looking out of place among the humans. But when he saw Ji-hoon, he gave a respectful nod. Hannah arrived last, carrying datapads full of research. I've been studying historical human warfare, she announced. Before modern technology, humans fought wars that lasted years, sometimes decades. Soldiers on campaign, for months at a time. Compare that to most alien species, who prefer short, decisive engagements. So what does that mean for us? Kyung asked. It means we stop trying to win fast. We focus on winning eventually. Hana pulled up tactical scenarios. Defensive operations. Attrition warfare. Psychological endurance. We make the enemy break before we do. They trained differently than the other recruits. No high-gravity chambers pushing them to their physical limits. Instead, they practiced maintaining equipment during extended operations. They learned to manage fatigue, to pace themselves, to find rest in impossible situations. They ran simulations that lasted days, not hours. Learning to eat while moving, sleep in shifts, maintain alertness during extended missions. Jihoon discovered something during this training. He was good at it. Not spectacular, not superhuman, but competent in ways that mattered. He could keep his rifle functional after 3 days without proper maintenance. He could stay alert on watch during his 4th consecutive shift. He could make decisions when exhausted that were still rational, if slow. You are learning to operate in your natural state, Doctor, Yoon explained during one of her regular check-ins. Enhanced soldiers train to push beyond their limits. You are training to recognize that your limits are much further out than anyone expected. 3 weeks into the specialized training, Commander Thalen entered their facility with urgent news. A distress call has been received from Talos Colony. They are under siege by Ravager forces. The Ravagers were one of the Coalition's persistent enemies. They weren't particularly advanced, but they used overwhelming numbers and continuous assault tactics, wave after wave of attackers, never stopping. Designed to break defenders through sheer attrition. The colony has been under attack for 60 hours, Thalen continued. Relief forces have attempted to break through, but were repelled. The defenders are exhausted, making critical errors. Command estimates the colony will fall within 24 hours. Hana looked up sharply. How long would it take us to get there? 8 hours by fast transport. Then we can reach them before they collapse. Hana turned to the team. This is exactly what we've been training for. Extended defensive operations against continuous assault. Jihoon felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. This wasn't a simulation. Real people were dying. The enemy wouldn't disappear when the test ended. Are we ready for this? He asked. Thalen's crystalline form seemed to pulse with light. By traditional standards? No. You have only trained for 3 weeks. But this situation requires exactly your specific capabilities. No one else can reach the colony in time, and no one else can sustain defensive operations the way you can. Vector stood, his massive form radiating confidence. I am ready. I will fight alongside you. One by one, the others stood. Sumin, Kyung, Hana, all of them tired from training. None of them elite soldiers by conventional standards. Finally, Jihoon stood as well. He was terrified. He still thought of himself as the weakest recruit, the convenience store clerk who had accidentally joined the military. But he had lasted 76 hours in the gauntlet. He had saved Vector in open space. He had discovered that his weaknesses on paper were strengths in reality. Let's go save that colony, Jihoon said. The transport ship launched within the hour, carrying the smallest and strangest special operations team in Coalition history. As they accelerated toward Talos Colony, Jihoon looked at his teammates. They weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. They weren't enhanced or optimized or genetically perfect. But they were still here, still ready to fight. Sometimes, that was enough. Talos Colony looked like a dying star when their transport ship approached. Fires burned across the settlement. Visible even from orbit, the defensive shields flickered weakly, barely holding against the continuous bombardment. Sumin piloted them through the debris field surrounding the colony, her hands steady on the controls despite the danger. Explosions bloomed in space around them as Ravager ships tried to intercept. She weaved through the attacks with calm precision, never wasting energy on unnecessary maneuvers. Landing zone is hot, she reported. Multiple hostiles surrounding the main defensive perimeter. Put us down anyway, Hana said. She was studying tactical displays, analyzing the colony's defensive layout. We need to reach the command center and coordinate with local forces. The transport shook as it entered atmosphere. Warning alarms screamed about hostile targeting locks. Suman ignored them, focused entirely on reaching the surface intact. They landed hard in the colony's central plaza. The team grabbed their gear and rushed out of the transport. The sounds of battle were everywhere. Weapons, fire, explosions, screaming. A Krath officer met them at the edge of the plaza. He looked exhausted, his bronze scales scorched and dented. "You are the reinforcements?" "We are," Hana said. The officer looked at their small group, then laughed bitterly. "5 soldiers? Command sent 5 soldiers? We are what you have," Vectar rumbled. "Accept our aid or do not. But we came to fight." The officer led them to the command center, a reinforced bunker beneath the Colonial Administration building. Inside, the situation was chaos. Officers shouted into communicators, trying to coordinate defenders who were barely holding their positions. Commander Wrath, a Vex like Thalen but with darker crystal formations suggesting age or stress, stood at the central display. She turned as the team entered. "You are Thalen's experimental unit," Wrath said. "I was told to expect unconventional support." "What is the current situation?" Hana asked, moving straight to the tactical displays. "Dire. We have been under continuous assault for 63 hours. They cycle fresh troops constantly while we have no reinforcements." Roth highlighted positions on the map. "Our defenders are making critical errors from exhaustion, friendly fire incidents, abandoned posts, complete psychological breakdowns." Ji-hoon looked at the displays. 2,000 colonists, mostly civilians. The defensive force had started at 400 soldiers, now down to less than 200 effective combatants, against an enemy that just kept coming. "How long can you hold?" Hana asked. "Optimistically, 12 hours. Realistically, we will likely collapse within 6. Enhanced coalition soldiers held the key defensive positions. They fought brilliantly, their superior capabilities evident in every engagement. But Ji-hoon could see the pattern. They had been fighting at peak intensity for too long. Even the best soldiers had limits. "We need to change the defensive strategy," Hana said. "Stop trying to fight at maximum intensity. Start rotating positions, accepting imperfect performance, managing fatigue." "We are barely holding as it is," Wrath objected. "Reducing our combat effectiveness will let them break through." "You are going to break through anyway if your soldiers collapse from exhaustion." Hana's voice was firm. "We need to transition to sustainable defense." Wrath looked at Commander Thalen's authorization codes on Hana's datapad. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. What are your recommendations?" "Put my team in a secondary defensive sector. Let us demonstrate the approach. If it works, we will extend it to other positions." They were assigned to Sector 7, a section of the defensive perimeter that had seen constant fighting. The soldiers there looked like the walking dead, eyes glazed, movements mechanical, clearly running on nothing but adrenaline and fear. Ji-hoon's team relieved them, sending the exhausted defenders back to rest. The next Ravager wave was due in 90 minutes. "Everyone check your equipment," Hana ordered. "Eat something if you can. Kyung, set up the communication relay. Suman, I want firing positions mapped with fallback routes. Vectar, help fortify the weak points in our line." Ji-hoon helped with the preparations, moving sandbags and setting up firing positions. The work was hard, but manageable. "Pace yourself," he thought. "This is going to be long." The Ravagers came exactly on schedule. They were insectoid creatures, each one about the size of a large dog. Individually weak, but they came in hundreds. Chittering, scuttling, overwhelming through sheer numbers. The team opened fire. Ji-hoon found his rhythm quickly. Aim, breathe, squeeze, trigger, conserve ammunition. Don't try for impossible shots. Just steady, consistent pressure on the enemy advance. Vectar fought beside him, the Krath's heavy weapon chewing through the Ravager swarm. But even Vectar was pacing himself, firing in controlled bursts rather than holding the trigger down. The 4-hour wave felt endless. The Ravagers just kept coming, climbing over their own dead, flowing around obstacles like living water. Jihoon's arms ached from holding his rifle. His eyes burned from the smoke. His ears rang from the constant weapons fire. But he kept fighting. When the wave finally ended, Kyung immediately established communication with command. Sector 7 holding. No casualties. Ammunition at 60%. Other sectors reported in. 2 positions had fallen. Their enhanced defenders finally breaking after hours of continuous combat. The gaps were filled by reserve forces, but those reserves were running out. 4 hours until the next wave, Hana said. Everyone rotate. 2 people on watch, 3 rest. Set alarms. We will wake you in 2 hours for rotation. Jihoon found a corner and sat down. He was exhausted but not broken. He ate a ration bar, drank some water, and tried to rest. Around him, the sounds of the dying colony continued. Distant weapons fire, screaming, explosions. 2 hours later, Sumin woke him for watch duty. He took up position at the defensive line, scanning for enemy movement while others rested. The cycle continued. Wave after wave of Ravagers attacked. Jihoon's team held their section without collapsing. They weren't fighting brilliantly. Their elimination counts were lower than enhanced soldiers, their response times slower. But they didn't break. Hour 72. Half of the original defenders were gone now, either dead, wounded, or psychologically incapable of continuing. The enhanced soldiers were falling apart, making catastrophic mistakes born of exhaustion. Commander Wrath made a decision that shocked everyone. She put Jihoon in overall command of defensive operations. You have held your sector for 12 hours without significant losses, Wrath said. Meanwhile, enhanced soldiers are killing each other through friendly fire. I am out of options. Jihoon stood in the command center, looking at the tactical displays. He had never commanded anything larger than a convenience store shift. Now he was responsible for 2,000 lives. Okay, he said slowly. Here is what we are going to do. He implemented Hana's sustainable defense strategy across all sectors. Rotating shifts. Accepting imperfect performance. Focusing on endurance over excellence. The enhanced soldiers who remained struggled with the concept they were trained to fight at peak efficiency, not to manage their own fatigue. But they were too exhausted to argue. They followed orders. Hour 84. The Ravagers launched a massive assault, throwing their entire force into one overwhelming push. Their commanders had never seen prey that refused to break. They committed everything to crush the defenders once and for all. Jihoon watched the enemy surge forward on the displays. This was it. If they held this wave, they might survive. If they failed, everyone died. All positions, listen to me. He broadcast on all channels. Do not try to be heroes. Do not try to be perfect. Just hold your positions. Keep fighting. One more wave. We can survive one more wave. The battle was chaos. Ravagers poured across every defensive line simultaneously. Ammunition ran low. Defensive positions collapsed under the weight of numbers. Jihoon rotated defenders constantly, pulling back anyone who started breaking, filling gaps with whoever had rested most recently. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't efficient, but it was sustainable. Hours blurred together. Jihoon lost track of time. He just kept giving orders, moving people around, preventing total collapse through constant adjustment. Finally, impossibly, the Ravager assault faltered. Their numbers thinned. The waves came less frequently, with less intensity. They are withdrawing, Kyung reported, monitoring enemy communications. Their commanders are confused. They do not understand why we have not broken. Hour 96. The Ravager fleet broke orbit and jumped to hyperspace. The siege was over. Jihoon stood in the command center, swaying on his feet. Around him, defenders who had survived started to realize what had happened. They had won. Not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. They had simply refused to quit. Commander Wrath approached Jihoon. The Vex officer looked as exhausted as anyone, but there was something like respect in her posture. "You held for 36 hours under your command," Wrath said. "No catastrophic collapses, no friendly fire incidents. Lower casualty rate than any previous defensive action against Ravager forces." "We just did what we could," Jihoon said. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. "Exactly. And what you could was sufficient." Medical teams moved through the command center, checking everyone for injuries and exhaustion. Jihoon's team gathered together. They all looked terrible, dirty, exhausted, barely able to stand. But they were alive. Vector placed a heavy hand on Jihoon's shoulder. "You fought well, small human. You all fought well." "We fought adequately," Hana corrected with a tired smile. "Which is apparently better than fighting well." 6 months later, Jihoon stood in a training facility on the Coalition's primary military station. He was a lieutenant now, though he still felt strange about the rank. Around him, the first class of the baseline human endurance unit ran through exercises. The recruitment process had changed. Coalition centers on Earth no longer focused exclusively on enhanced candidates. They tested for psychological resilience, endurance capacity, and the ability to function under extended stress. The galaxy's military academies had added new courses to their programs. Human persistence tactics was becoming standard curriculum. Other species studied how humans fought, trying to understand the strange approach that prioritized sustainable operations over immediate victory. Hana, now Captain Lee, visited during training exercises. "They are still trying to figure out how to measure it," she said. "Human endurance. It does not show up on conventional scans. It is not physical. It is psychological. How do you explain it to them?" Jihoon asked. "I tell them humans are distance runners in a galaxy of sprinters. We did not evolve to win the first race. We evolved to still be running when everyone else quit." A young recruit approached, nervous and clearly out of place among the more impressive candidates. She reminded Jihoon of himself 6 months ago. "Lieutenant Park? I am Mina from Incheon. The scanners had trouble reading me during screening. Commander Thalen said, I should report to you." Jihoon smiled. He remembered that feeling, confused, uncertain, convinced you were in the wrong place. "Welcome to the unit," he said. "Let me tell you something important. You are going to struggle here. You will be slower than enhanced soldiers, weaker than warrior species. You will finish last in almost every physical test." Mina looked worried. "Then why accept me?" "Because those tests measure the wrong things. They measure how fast you can start. We need people who are still running when everyone else has stopped." Jihoon gestured to the training facility. "Can you do that? Can you just keep going?" Mina straightened, something like determination entering her expression. "Yes, sir." "Good. Then you are exactly where you need to be." That night, Jihoon sat in his quarters, reviewing training reports. His personal communicator chimed. A message from Commander Thalen. "Lieutenant Park. The Coalition Defense Committee has requested a briefing on baseline human combat doctrine. You will present next month. Please prepare comprehensive analysis." Jihoon stared at the message. They wanted him to present to the Defense Committee. Him, the convenience store clerk who had accidentally joined the military. He still didn't think of himself as strong. Probably never would. Every day, he saw enhanced soldiers who could lift incredible weights, run impossible speeds, fight with superhuman skill. But he also knew something they didn't. Strength came in different forms. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was simply refuse to give up. His communicator chimed again. A message from Hana. Saw Thalen's message. "You will do great. You always do. You just keep going until it works out." Jihoon smiled. That was pretty much his entire tactical philosophy summed up in one sentence. Outside his window, Earth hung in space, blue and beautiful. Somewhere down there, In a convenience store in Busan, someone was stocking shelves, living an ordinary life, not knowing they possessed capabilities that could change how an entire galaxy thought about warfare. Ji-hoon had been that person. In many ways, he still was that person. But now he understood that ordinary could be extraordinary. That average could be exceptional. That sometimes, the weakest recruit on paper was exactly strong enough